Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to have my friend, the fiery warrior goddess, Heather Ash Amara, here today. She is such an amazing woman. Opens my heart every time I just sit with her. She's the author of 9 books, including the best-selling Warrior Goddess Training, The 7 Secrets to Happy and Healthy Relationships with Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., and The Warrior Heart Practice. Raised in Southeast Asia, Heather Ash has traveled the world from childhood and is continually inspired by the diversity and beauty of human expression and experience. Heather Ash, so good to be with you.
Thanks, Michael. So happy to be here.
I love our theme, being a wild, witchy, and wise warrior in fiery times. I take that's not only women, even though we're talking about the feminine archetypes. But tell us about what you mean by being a wild, witchy, wise warrior in fiery times.
I think it's so important for us to claim all 3 of these different archetypes. The wild one is the part of us that is creative and expressive and expansive and curious, and is also really deeply connected to that animal part of ourselves, that instinctual knowing. And in ancient times, we can say, in times that when we were more connected to the earth and to the moon, that archetype was called the maiden, which was the waxing moon, the growing and expressive expansion of the moon and of our being. And then there's the witchy, what I call the witchy self, which is the part of us that's a sustainer, that nurtures, that gives birth, and then creates steadiness in our lives and for our family. And that part is connected to the mother, and that's the full moon, that's the radiance of the blossoming. And then there is the third archetype, which is connected to the waning moon, which is around letting go and releasing. And this is the wise part of us. It's the part of us that is connected to all of the cycles and that has the biggest view, is able to step back and see how everything is interconnected, is deeply connected to stillness, presence, and how the web is woven in all of creation. So it doesn't see humans as separate. It sees us as a weaving of the divine and the divinity. And that is the crone energy. And I always link these 3 to fire because we're in really fiery times. We're in times of immense change. And so to understand how to be in relationship with these 3 different archetypes as also qualities of fire will help us to meet the times. And so that wild energy is about the spark. It's the beginning. It's that fast heat. The witchy energy is about steady flame, being really steady and present, and learning how to nurture something so that it lasts over time, so that we're not just burning ourselves out, that we're really able to stay present. And then that third quality is around the coals. How do we pull our energy in so that we can burn brightly inside, and that we have this incredible longevity, and we're also able to see what's needed. How long do we need to keep the fire really deeply contained so that it can then be sparked up again when it's needed? So there's an overview of those 3 archetypes that I've been playing with.
I'm feeling them, and often working with people on the feminine side, but I'm also thinking of on the masculine side, the wild son, the father, and the elder are the same kind, and how they merge together. Maybe not with the cycle of the moons, maybe more with the turning of the seasons. I'm not sure how that comes together, but you mentioned that the maiden, the wild child, that was part of the animal nature. So let's deepen our understanding of this phase of the new moon that's opening to possibility and becoming.
The maiden energy is so connected to our animal self. And the animal self is a part of us that's really connected to instinct and that knows at a deep level and is willing also to try new things, to explore. So if you look at, a great thing to look at is puppies or like little cats. And they learn by playing. They learn by trying things. They learn by making mistakes. And it's that kind of awkward play that creates skill.
Yeah.
And we have been so domesticated to almost have a fear of the animal self. And if we look at the ways that we've been disconnected from the earth, we've been disconnected from our bodies, one of the ways that really shows up is in our fear that we can have of our animal self, and this belief that I think is often really deeply embedded in our culture, in the field, in our bodies, of I can't really trust my animal self, because we've been taught so often in subtle and in sometimes really obvious ways, your animal self, if you just let it go, is going to be completely out of control. It's going to totally wreck your life. It's going to want to have sex with everyone, and eat everything and be lazy. And that's so not true.
Yeah, I'm just feeling into that, that energy and thinking about how disembodied we become at a very early age, and the impact of colonialism, patriotism, education, Christianity, how does the maiden get to express themselves in these times of fear and chaos and oppression?
Yeah, because that's also woven in, is you're not allowed to play, you're not allowed to have fun. This is serious, like we have to grind down. And our sense of connection to life force and possibility, because this is what the maiden is also about, is like hope and innocence and curiosity of what are other ways to look at things. So to get back into relationship with that, it's not a secondary thing of like, oh, that'll be great when I have time. I think it's actually critical, especially with what's happening in the world right now, that all of us get back in touch with that maiden / sun, young, playful, curious energy, because we really need it in hard times. That's what helps us to see things in completely different ways. It's what helps us get out of the sense of hopelessness, the sense of overwhelm, the sense of fear that can happen when there's so much shifting going on in our personal lives and in the world in general. So to get back to it is to give ourselves permission to find our own curiosity, to find our own sense of play, and that it's not an immature expression. It's actually the life force moving through us and allowing us to perceive the world in a really different way than we might have been taught.
Yeah. One of the important things I think that you just said that I think is really worth exploring is this idea of postponed experience. Oh, I can get to that later. We have this very early kind of training that is set aside the rawness, the animal nature, the wildness, because I have to go to school and get enculturated and learn how to shop and all of those kinds of things. And it creates all the way through life this really trauma-based experience of, oh, I'll get to that when something happens, then I'll be able to be free and wild and carefree, and we keep postponing the experience. And I'm wondering how to rejuvenate that inculturation that is so powerful from school and the collective and the field, and then the fear that young people are having to come into if they're on social media or if they're listening to the news, it's like bombardment. So how do we meet that and let it move through us rather than run over us?
And we have to be willing to go back into nature. I mean, it's really that simple in a way, is that you can't read a book around this and figure out or intellectualize it or have a discussion with somebody else about it. It must be a lived experience, and that lived experience is being on the land, connecting to the trees, going for walks, watching the clouds, all of those things that, used to be what we did when we were kids, like before there were computers, before there was cell phones. I was out traipsing around the creeks and walking up and down the hills and catching frogs, and that place of reconnecting really viscerally, because the trees, the animals, the wind will teach us how to get back into relationship with the wild, and will also get us out of the fear that there's no hope. Because when you're immersed in the news, it can feel incredibly hopeless, because there's always bad things happening. And when we have to have that in perspective. So I'm not saying completely disconnect, because we also want to have access to that human self as well and know what's happening on the planet. And there's something about going and being in an experiential relationship with nature that could be, even if you live in New York City, there's plenty of parks, there's plenty of places to find it. Backyard, places that, you go hiking. So it doesn't have to be, I must go to the wild, it might just be go hang out in your backyard and look at the grass for a while and let your body reconnect with what's already wild around you. We're always in the wild. Like, it's not like we go outside of our world to get into nature. We're in nature. We're in the wild already. We just have to start recognizing it and reattuning our being to that. So our body knows how to do that already. We just have to create the space for it.
Our body does know how to do it, but so many of us from really early on are disembodied, that we have separated from our body. So part of, I know, the work you do is to create somatic experiences. Talk about helping people to, you can be in nature and be totally in your head and thinking about the next dance that I'm going to, or the next burger or whatever. But it's a very different experience to be in your body in nature.
Yeah, and some of the tools that I love teaching people to help get out of the mind is learning how to shift our perception. So, Michael, I've talked so much about trauma and how to undo trauma in the body and how to reconnect. And it takes time. I think that's just the thing that we all have to understand, is that there aren't quick fixes. It takes time for us to dismantle the ways that we have disconnected. And so some of the tools that I work with is this idea of do things in a different way. We have habits of how we've been wired in our being, whether that's around trauma or just ways that we've done things. This is always how my family did it, and now I do it that way. And so this idea of not doings is such a powerful one. It's one of my favorite tools, and it's a great one connected to getting back into our wild self, because what it teaches us to do is look differently, be creative. So a really, like, one of the traditional ways is look at the shadows rather than the light, because our brain is wired to look at the light of how we've been domesticated and how we've been raised. And so if you go outside and just say to yourself, hi, sweetheart, hi, and that's where I always start, hi, sweetheart.
Yeah, you're so good at that.
Sorry, I've been away, right? I'm back, I'm here. So that gentleness with ourselves, because really what we're doing is disrupting the way that we've lived in relationship to our judge and our victim. Because many of us, the wiring is, instead of having that wild connection out of unconditional love, we've often domesticated ourselves out of judgment and fear and victimization. So to unwind that means doing things in a different way that at first feel really weird. And so not doings of, okay, what does it even mean to just look at the shadows? And so at first there's this like, that doesn't even make sense, which is good. When we have that feeling sense of, I don't know how to do this, this doesn't make sense, I actually feel like, okay, we're on the right track, we're rewilding. Because we're forcing ourselves to perceive in a different way. And I don't mean forcing of like pushing, but just, come on, sweetheart, try this. Yeah. And it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to feel weird. But what happens as we do things like that, or we walk backwards slowly through the park, or we lie on our back and watch clouds for no reason, or we go and make altars. This is such a good thing. Make altars out of natural things. Like, this is such a great way to get into the kinesthetic. Build an altar, build something beautiful, and then let the wind take it.
Yeah, beautiful.
So that not doing is doing something that there's no reward and that there's not a reason that you're doing it, but you're really working with love to reconnect to yourself and to the world in new ways.
Practicing not trying to get somewhere.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And one of the things you said, habits create structure. I mean, literally create structure in our body, right? So this idea of rewilding in the maiden period is really important, because it's going to lay the neural pathways, the physical structures. So what I hear you saying is that these are ways of shifting habitual, recognizing, bringing awareness to, and then trying different ways to break up those structures that get created so early on, and to begin to bring awareness to them, and then start to break those habitual patterns that we have.
Yeah, and it's almost like go against what your serious adult self would say.
Right.
So, right, you're walking someplace and that there's this like, I want to run down that hill. Like, do it. I want to play on the swings. I've been in Europe, and I was in France, and on the Eiffel Tower, like I climbed the stairs to go up the Eiffel Tower because that seemed fun.
Yeah.
Wasn't fun halfway through, but it was fun at the end.
I've done it.
But there was a place up there where they had swings, and all the kids were on the swings, and I'm like, I need to be on one of those swings. And I just waited. Okay. And the adult self is like, no, you don't. That's for kids. But we have to reclaim that kid part of us. Yeah. Some of us never got to be kids. And it's never too late to go reclaim that part. And it's actually crucial for what we're navigating right now as a world. We need that wide open, innocent, curious self to come back online in relationship with the mother nurturing fire and the crone wise visionary. All three of them are really critical.
Yeah, and in this stage, it's really the from that place of bringing awareness it seems like it's the birthplace of creativity, innovation, interconnection, interdependency, all of those things that we so much need right now to move into the mother stage. And let's talk about that stage and how that moves from the maiden into the mother stage.
Absolutely. And we can look at like the maiden stage for me is the spark. It's the like explosion of a new idea and creative potential. And in order for that to then continue, we then need to learn how to nurture the fire and build that fire and get that fire steady. And so the mother energy is not about biological mothering, though that may be part of it. It's around birthing things. So taking the spark and then bringing it forward, growing it up. So often we have to grow ourselves up in the beginning. We have to learn how to raise ourselves. And the mother energy, or that what I call the witchy energy, is about reclaiming or claiming our power to build something and grow it so that it becomes steady, that it has presence. And that to do that, we have to become present to, we are bigger than just this. Like the maiden's very much about me, explore, explore, explore. And the mother is about, all right, let's create something and let's grow it, which means now instead of just one, we have two or more, whether that's a book or a human or a garden. It doesn't matter. You're now in relationship with more than self. And relationships take tending. So we have to learn how to tend. We have to learn how to be intimate. We get to learn how to listen deeply to the differences and to what's actually needed here rather than what we think is needed. So good mothering is a potent force of transformation because it teaches us how to be in the world in a way that is sustainable over time. And it allows us to deepen into what's needed here so that we're available to be in service to what it is that we're birthing and bringing forward.
I think it's easy and often trauma-based that people look at the mother from the giving aspect of it. But when I really tune in to my inner mother and the archetype from my experience, two of the things that are most important are receiving and grounding. And that's often damaged in the maiden stage. The ability to receive, that a child often doesn't get to be a child, is expected to be a mother or an adult at 5, and then never gets that real sense of receiving from the earth, taking in, and so a grounded taking in connection with the earth. What are your thoughts about that?
I love that. And how I think about that, the mother is the fire. And what a fire needs to really grow is it needs a base. So I always think about like it needs rocks or something to create a solid foundation for the fire. And that's the grounding that you were talking about. And then it also needs oxygen. It needs to be fed. And so it's in order for us to feed our creative projects and the magic that we're weaving in the world, we also have to feed our own fire. It's critical. And so often one of the negative aspects that can happen in the mother archetype is burnout, is giving, like you said, like just giving all the time. It's not sustainable. So sustainable mothering, sustainable fire, we take it into the element of fire, means both feeding our own fire and being really intimate with ourselves. What do I need? How do I become more receptive to take in not just from other humans, but from the more than human world, from the animals, from the wind, from all of the elements, to stay grounded in relationship to the earth, and also to be, like he said, permeable for the yumminess that's going to help us then spill over to feed around us.
Such a need for recharging that often is neglected in this, the kids and work and this and husband and time and all these things. We have to, in order to move into the crone and really weave the world, as we'll talk about, but is in order to get into that, we have to recharge our battery. And if we aren't resourced, we'll burn out. Our essence will burn out.
Yeah. And so we hold both, that we need the spark and the passion and the curiosity of the maiden, and we need the steady fire that is fed and that feeds in turn. Because when a fire is really going, it just naturally lights and nurtures what's around it. It's not an effort. And that's what we're working to get back to, is that we're so well resourced in relationship to our communities, to what our body needs, to what our emotional body needs, that we're stable in that way, because we're not efforting to try. I mean, one of the things that happens so often with that archetype of the mother is that we go into, I just have to fix everything else. Yeah. And if I just fix everything else, then I'm okay, which is definitely around trauma, around just bad habits.
Often trauma.
But if we start to see ourselves as like, what does my fire need to be the most sustainable, so that that fire can shine brightly into the world, then that rearranges everything. Because we automatically are going, our light is automatically going to shine when we're well resourced. And sometimes there's a lot of undoing to get back to valuing ourselves, rather than thinking our value is only in what we do, to come back into valuing who we are, the beingness of ourselves.
And that resourcing allows us to move then to being the weaver of wisdom, the warrior woman or man. So let's talk about that, then move, because there's the elder or the wise or the crone, whatever you want to call it, but there's also just old women and old men. They're not weaving anything.
Right.
Hopefully I'm not in that place.
Yes. And those archetypes, like, I like using the word crone. I can't tell you how many people are like, can you use a different word? Like, no, it's a good word. Like elder, it's a good word. And it's not about age. Right. It's about wisdom. It's about processing our experiences, digesting our experiences, learning from them, and connecting to the wisdom that is available to us when we slow down. So as we connect with this third stage, and we're all parts that, we all have maiden, we all have mother, we all have crone, that the crone energy is about big picture view. That instead of seeing just me and my little family, that I'm able to step back and say, how does this choice I'm about to make impact everyone? Or how is this thing that I'm untangling, how is it part of a larger weaving in the world? And we start to understand the power of when we bring our energy and we pull our awareness in and really connect to what I call our silent knowledge. That connection to our silent knowledge, which is within all of us, it's our intuition, it is the wisdom that's available to us when we slow down and connect, that then is going to transform everything, because we're looking at the biggest picture possible. And our actions then are deeply woven with not just the now, but the future and the past. And we start to realize everything ripples out from those coals. Like, the heat is intense and lasting. And it's deep warmth. It's deep bone warmth.
It feels like in this stage, a disillusion of self, that there's a opening to more life moving through us with less effort, with virtually no effort, because it's just allowing life to move through us. But the self is diminished because the I think of the wise woman or the wise man as that closure of my will and thy will, that I allow myself to be sourced, and nature is not out there, you aren't out there. I move from a point to a wave in terms of the quantum view of it, to look at it that way, that now, like you're over here in, you know, in England, I mean, in Edinburgh, and but in a very real way, you're in my nervous system over here, and my capacity to know you is my capacity to know myself, because that's the constraints of my ability to know you as you in me. And that kind of creates a whole different field. And people who are in that place, you know, there's a real groundedness and a different kind of spark, more like I can relax and feel safe in the presence of this person.
Because what happens is I think about it like the coals, it's like our life experience. We've made the choice to use everything to be less jagged, to be less reactionary, to have opinions. Like we've used our life to help us surrender into the divine and into that heart, that beautiful heart space that, like you said, isn't personal any longer.
Yeah, the challenges and the difficulties and the craziness in the world becomes, that's our work, is to meet that, is to feel it, is to be, I love Tonglen, you know, Pema's work with Tonglen meditation, being, you know, allowing the darkness to move through you and clear and dissolve in the allowing it to move through us. Such a beautiful, yeah.
Yeah. And the metaphor of the coals too is like, I always think about like the darkness that's around the coals, and that we've really, when we're in that crone archetype, we've learned to rest into the darkness, into our own shadow, and to be comfortable with it, to be comfortable just with the darkness in general, that there is that beauty of stillness and of resting into the mystery and the unknown. And that is where we then connect to a totally different way of being in the world that, like we've been sharing, like isn't personal. It's just this glow and this deep compassion for all of us humans, for all of the planet. And it's such a gift to be in that place of peace, even when there's chaos. And it's that place where our nervous system is relaxed, where we're open-hearted, where we can respond to emergencies. And we're not responding to the emergency out of, I must fix this right now, I don't know what else to do. But of like, okay, let me drop in, let me connect to that divinity within me, that coal that's always within me, that's always burning, and meet what is arising from deep compassion.
So beautiful. Ash, talk about the rise of the dark feminine, the Black Madonna. You know, there seems to be an emergence and interest of that shadow part, and I'm wondering how that fits into your model.
For me, that is an aspect of the crone, and the dark goddess is the goddess that's connected to death, that's connected to the mystery, and also the, you know, so often when we talk about the dark goddesses, they're doing the work that nobody else wants to do in a way. They're the ones that are transmuting and transforming the poison of the world. And as we're now, as you know, on the planet, there's so much heaviness, there's so much poison, literally and emotionally. I mean, the planet's choking on plastic, just that I feel like inside each of us, we recognize being nice and being like, yay, I'm just going to nurture everything ain't enough. It's not going to work. We really need the sword of those dark goddesses and those energies that are like, all right, things have to change. And the clarity of, in order to transform, we have to transmute. And that means going into the darkness. That means calling in these archetypical energies that are the crone connected to death, so that we can really figure out, how do we do this? Where it seems like there's no hope. But I feel like within the dark goddesses, there's hope, because there's a relationship with death, which is about new life.
Yeah, it's such a new age spiritual bypass. I would just want to be light. I just want to give light. I'm going to put light here and there and everywhere, and ignore that there's this enormous darkness that is very consuming, and it's wanting to be seen and healed and awoken to that shadow part of that we all carry about that. And so this idea of, oh, I'm just a little light beam, I'm sunshine, it's I don't mean to demean the positive that some people carry, but we have to be willing to go into the dark. And at the crone level, then to be what you would call a crone, or a wise warrior, you would have to be that.
Yeah, because basically when we're doing that light and love, what we're doing is only doing maiden and the first big part of mother, the birthing part. Like, I birthed something, and so it's like the maiden and I birthed something. The hard work of, now I have to raise it and take responsibility and learn how to receive and learn how to be intimate, like the messy part, and clean up, like, and then the death part, like we don't want to deal with that part. But it's not whole living. It's a fantasy. It's only one part of the cycle, like, in a very small part of it. And so, when we talk about shamanic wisdom is about the light and the dark, and recognizing both. It's about coming back into wholeness. It's about learning how to transmute the places where there's poison inside of us and also in the planet. And that transmutation is not, sometimes people are like, well, you just have to bring the light into the dark. I'm like, can we just go hang out in the dark and just be in the mystery and let the darkness actually inform us as well as the light? Because there's wisdom there, there's power there as well. And when we really are able to be in relationship with the parts of ourselves that are scared, or that are rageful, or that are, we talk about the shadow is the places that we push down, whatever those things are. And when we're able to say, come on, let's see who's here. Let's see what's here. And we can be in relationship with our rage and our terror and our confusion. That's when wisdom arises. That's when we reclaim the crone. And I think that that darkness now is our best teacher and our best guide, the crone. But in order to also hold her, we have to also find the playfulness again. Because otherwise we can get too into the ending part of the cycle and forget that there's still possibility.
Yeah. I'm reminded, as you were speaking, of Rumi's guest house, invite them all in, the terror, the horror, this, the that. But that can almost be a playful thing, oh, I'm going to play, like Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, can you hold your little anger and love your little anger, It's very playful. And then, if you're around Thich Nhat Hanh, it's like, he's always kind of playful, or Desmond Tutu,
Yeah.
there, and you are just like, oh, look at this little anger, look at this little hatred and resentment. Oh my goodness, what can I do with that? oh, I can really explore that. Where's that coming from? Where am I not allowing myself to open to that part, that darkness?
It's so true. And, Michael, you know this, like I have a really deep relationship with fire. I've been a fire walk instructor and playing with fire for many, many, many years. I love leading people across the fire. And in May, the land that I steward, I have 180 acres that I steward in New Mexico. The biggest wildfire in New Mexico history came through my property on May 15th. And suddenly there was fire as the dark goddess, because there was fire that was destroying, and we lost 175 acres of trees. And like 75 acres is sterilized. Like the fire burned so hot and took so much. And so to go walk up on that land, it took me a while to be like, okay, I'm finally ready to go walk up on that land, was so heartbreaking. And also I was like, and here's what is. Here's what is. Like, we're on the edge, like it's connected to climate change, no doubt. And it's also life, like fires happen. And I've had people say, well, how can you be in relationship to the fire? It's destroyed so much of what you love. I'm like, yeah, sometimes things get destroyed. And I've had grief and heartbreak, and there's beauty there as well. And I think it's so important for us to understand that when we're in relationship to the elements are not controllable. And we as humans are getting to see that more and more. And so how do we keep our hearts open when there's more fires and more flooding and more unknown in relationship to the elements? And, one of the things I've been talking to people about is that you can't, like, I love fire as long as it's a candle flame. You get to choose, I'm just going to love fire. Fire does its thing. And it's not, the fire did not go, I'm going to destroy Heather Ash's dream. The fire said, there's stuff to consume. I'm coming this way, right? I'm playing with the wind because the winds were 50 miles an hour that night, right? And so to really recognize that the elements are doing what they're doing, they're not doing anything to punish us, I don't believe. And there's consequences for our actions as humans that we're now seeing the results of. And so how do we honor the consequences, even if we didn't put them into motion? We're part of this natural cycle that's happening right now, whether it was, I do think that it's been exacerbated by humans, and there's also cycles on the planet, and we're in a big one right now. And so I think for all of us, part of why I'm really working with the Maiden, Mother, and Crone energies and the spark and the flame and the coals right now is to also help us to hold loss and to be in relationship with it. One of the things that we did is we did a photo shoot up on the land blowing bubbles. And the photos are unbelievable because there's like all this black, like everything's black, and then there's these little bubbles floating through. And that was our way of just being like, and we can still be playful here. It wasn't disrespect. It was just, all right, it's different. How are we going to play with this?
So I was so saddened by the loss, and at the same time, I see the depth of another level of teaching in you and your community to be able to hold this. And we've gone from the Holocene to the Anthropocene. Do you know what scientists are calling this age? The Pyrocene.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Wow.
So get ready. I mean, yeah,
get ready.
It's here. It's here.
Yeah.
And that's the cleansing. I mean, fire is the element of transformation and transmutation. And it's what's here. And you can't run away from it. It's everywhere. So how can we learn to be more and more present to it and quit blaming it on politicians or greedy corporations or this, and actually use it as a personal cleansing for me to be more connected to the world, not less connected to the world. and more able to let life move through me than the life happening to me and running me over. And you're such an example of that. And I saw you go through the phases of deep grief, and I was crying with you, and it's so big, but the teaching that is, I mean, just the people listening here, the 100,000 people or so that are listening to this recording, I hope they can feel that I feel it in you. When I'm feeling you, I'm feeling that deep wisdom that is part of the deep grief that you've been gone through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so grateful for my practice and my connection to the dark, because what I did when I knew the fire, like there was a lot of prayers. I knew the fire was coming through a couple of weeks beforehand, and I still was like, but maybe I'm wrong. But when I knew, and this, technology is amazing, I could watch the fire go across the land. Because all the satellite, like they're tracking all this stuff. So when that happened, I just sat and just started singing to the trees. I'm like, what else can I do? I can pretend this isn't happening. I can feel like this is a personal punishment. I can feel like it's hopeless, or I can be with my friends.
Yeah.
And
Or
that's
blame and be resentful. There's another.
Or blame and be resentful. Yeah. Yeah. And so to just I was like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? And that's where I got super quiet. And I was like, be with your friends, just energetically sing to the trees. They're going. And what's amazing is that allowed me to keep my heart open, because fire is an element of transformation, like you said. And I loved those trees so deeply.
Mm.
And what ended up happening is my favorite tree on the whole place is 400-year-old Douglas fir that I call the grandma tree. She survived.
Wow.
There's acres of black, and then there's this little island of her and some of her baby. I mean, it's amazing.
Wow.
So, but we have to be willing to let go and lose it all. I think that's what will allow us to go through what's coming, is that the willingness to let go of all of it, to keep surrendering what we know up, and to stay open to miracles and possibilities simultaneously. So it's like holding hands with the crone and with the maiden, and then being the best mother that we could. For me, that was holding the hands of my beloved and singing as the fires came through. And that takes a lot of willingness to let go of what we think it should look like. Now, I did not bypass the grief. I still have grief around it. And I also know something new wants to be born here. And what it did is it helped rearrange my brain, because I had a 5-year plan with the land of bringing humans, and it was going to be a hermitage and getting people so they could connect to stillness and be off grid. And what it did is it just shattered that. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's still going to happen. The land is still really intact, actually. So we're still building, we're still doing the next phase. But what it did is it just radically shifted my perspective to now 50-year plan plus. How do I create an ecosystem that'll support the butterflies and the bees and the animals?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ash, we're getting close to the end of our time, I think. And do you want to do a ceremony, a song, a journey, or do you want to say something just to pull all the pieces? We've talked about a lot of things to pull it together. What wants to move through you right now?
Let's do a little visualization to close. That would be really sweet.
I like that too. I was hoping to say
that. You were secretly hoping for that. Great. So if everyone can close your eyes and put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly, let's connect with these yummy animal bodies that we have, and these beautiful human tender hearts that we have. And also opening to connect with the divine, with the spirit that moves through all of us, that weaves us all together. And just feel of these three archetypes that we've talked about, the wild self, the maiden spark, the witchy self, that powerful mother fire energy, or that wise self, the crone, the deepening into wisdom, that coal of connection. In your life right now, what could you use more of? So if you just connect with that wild or witchy or wise self, who wants to speak or who wants to be brought more into your life at this time? Who has a message or a gift? What do you need more of in your life at this time? So just let yourself settle into connecting with one of those archetypes. Wild, maiden, wild child. That witchy, creative, spell, magic, mother energy. Or that wise, still, visionary, crone or elder energy. Imagine that you can breathe one of those archetypes into your being, really calling it in. What does it feel like in your body? And how can it guide you in these times? Beautiful. And just saying thank you to each of those archetypes. Maiden, mother, crone. However you perceive those in your life, that spark, fire, coal. And let's just close with a prayer that we may use everything that arises in our life to help us get more courageous, compassionate, creative, that we remember to play, to explore, that we open to being receptive and shining brightly as we nourish ourselves and others. And that we connect with our deepest compassion, stillness, and choose to dance in the mystery, both the dark and the light. Blessed be.
Blessed be. Oh, Heather Ashamara, I love you so much. And I'm so grateful to all the people that I know listen to this and were inspired, and just by who you're being, your words, the stories, the things you say, but you are your teaching. You are the teaching. And it's just amazing to spend time with you as always. And hope to see you really soon.
Yes, thank you, Michael, and just blessings to everyone on our dance with life.
Mm.
Mwah.